So we spent some time trying to understand how period 1 and period 2 were really setting the stage for the fruit to ripen. So again, to put things in perspective, we've understood the complexity of the climatic condition during period 1 at setting the stage for the leaf area development and the subsequent phenology of the fruit. But now that we have covered period 1 and period 2, let's dive into really what boils down to our issue today is how is the fruit actually embracing all those conditions and actually through its metabolic changes really reflecting the impact of those early variations. So during period 3, we are going now to see how the vine physiological changes are affecting the ripening. So I'd like to tie what we were discussing earlier during the first session with what's now to be expected. So you remember, here I'm showing the Merlot graphs where it was a bit counterintuitive because later on we finally ended up with a greater leaf area size, but counterintuitively, it was more difficult for the vine to maintain the canopy transpiration at a high level. So we had more stress, which translated with a fruit whose sugar accumulation was higher than 25 bricks at harvest, simply because the fruit was shriveling. More of 20% of the berry mass was lost due to water loss. So as a result, sugar got concentrated. And to corroborate what we were observing, the fact that the leaf area was reaching its maximal size earlier, but that this size was also reduced, meant that it was easier for the winemaker and the vineyard manager to manage a level of water stress that was less severely limiting than 2012, which actually transpired to the bricks level. So remember, we are in 2014, very dry, and a lot of heat waves, particularly after the 15th of October. However, because we mitigated the severity of the water deficit, the fruit was displaying a bricks of 23.5 in that example. And remember, the vintage 2013 in between, the one that had a medium water deficit compared to the two other, well, at no surprise, we see the carryover effect on sugar concentration being between the two. So the message I'm trying to convey here is that the water deficit profile has an impact on the sugar concentration. But sugar concentration and the time profile of sugar concentration is hard to predict. And the reason why it's hard to predict is because sugar concentration is the result of two things. In one hand, the maximal berry size, and in the other hand, the maximal amount of sugar that can fit in that bag that the berry is for sugar. So the take-home idea is that the larger is the berry, the more sugar you can feed in it. But that does not necessarily means that you're going to have a sugar content in terms of concentration that's going to be higher. So that's what the next slide is going to try to explain. Here you see one of the most stressed vineyards of Napa that we've been investigating. Why is it very stressed? Well, because it reached its maximal leaf area very early on. You see that the vine water deficit index reaches 100% before the end of May. So at this point, the 100% value indicates that the vine is fully satisfying its water needs. And then you had the crash. In less than 1 month, you see this decline, very rapid collapse, which is one of the hallmarks of this vintage, of this vineyard, sorry. It has an extremely draining root profile. And then the vineyard is actually striving while using roughly 50% of what it would normally use if it had all the water it needs in the world. Okay, but look at 2014. You see the similarities. You see a very similar pattern we are looking at the level of water deficit index. So it's at no surprise that the peak leaf area was reached earlier, because remember, that's one of the hallmarks of the vintage 2014. The maximum for vineyard water use is reached earlier. Okay, so the peak water deficit index is reached earlier. You see something that's very striking is the stability of this collapse here. In 2013, as well as in 2014, you see that those slopes are mirroring one another. So this is a very important thing. That means that the rate at which water deficit unfolds in the plant is something that you can predict that's going to repeat itself from one year to the next, regardless of the total amount of leaf area. But you see that the key differences between those two blocks is this delay, the shift from 2013 to 2014, where the decline started 10 days earlier. You see that the decline here was started 10 days earlier in 2013. So that's it. That's an earlier onset of water deficit. And this is really the main difference you can see between those two graphs, because once this decline has been started, you see that the winemakers did a good job at maintaining the water deficit bouncing back and forth. Actually, if you look at the area under the blue line, it's slightly above the area under the green line. So technically, the stress level in 2014 was less severe than in 2013. But the timing when water deficit kicked in was earlier in 2014, and that's the game changer. That's the game changer in terms of fruit, because when you look at the anatomy of the berry size is larger in 2013, even if the water deficit profile is roughly the same. And in 2013, because the berry size was larger, the amount of sugar was also more important, 220 milligrams per berry. In 2014, because we had a very early onset of water deficit, that sends strong signals to the berry to be sized to a lower size, to be reduced. A lower berry size, you see, we picked the berry size at 0.75 grams, program the maximal amount of sugar per berry to be also lower. So what I'm trying to get at here is this idea according to which berry size and quantity of sugar are not only varietal specific, but they also reflect the intimate relationship between the timing when water deficit kicks in and how the berry is going to set. You also understand that predicting Brix variation is complex because it results from both berry size, that's why we track berry size and the variation of berry size in time, and the sugar accumulation rate. So in this context, let's see what's specific about the vintage 2014. Here, we presented the time profile of Brix in 2014 versus three earlier vintages in that same vineyard. And what's striking here is that the 2014 vintage stood apart by its earliness in terms of sugar accumulation. Look at here. By August 5th, we had reached 23.5 Brix, when by August 5th here, we were below 10 Brix. You see? So that means that 2014 was very distinguished from its earlier onset of sugar accumulation. Another thing that's also striking is that the speed is roughly the same. You see this S-shaped curve where it's rather flat at the beginning, then speeds up very quickly, and then starts to flatten at the end. So the speed is not very much affected, but the onset is affected. And that was also what Professor Mark Matthews had told 3 years ago in the Vintage Conference. So now we see really how it affects the maturation of sugar. So very early sugar accumulation rate in 2014. But within 2014, the second take-home message I'd like to stress is how early it looks and how that's going to impact our maturation check. You see here 3 different vineyards are displaying exactly the same patterns in 2014. And what's really important to look at here is this phase during which we have the steepest rise in sugar accumulation. So things are moving slowly, then very fast, and then slowly again. So that's what I'm stressing here. You see that sugar accumulation rate increase rather slowly, and then speed up very fast, and then slows down again. And what's amazing to me, because we had never seen that, is that the fastest speed of sugar accumulation happened between June 30th and July 15. That means that most of the most fundamental changes in primary metabolites are to be captured in July. So if we are in a similar context this year, that means that your fruit composition, if you really want to capture how metabolic changes, how sugar accumulates, how malic acid degrades, you need to start at the end of June, which for me was scary. I had never seen that. So the key idea before passing the word to the next speaker is that quantities and timing of sugar accumulation and ripening in a big picture are greatly affected by the season. Number 1, earliness of peak maximal transpiration, earliness of the peak of sugar accumulation, and also the earliness of the most rapid phase of sugar accumulation. So we have 3 phenomena that are impacted by the vintage. The moment when the maximal vineyard water use is being reached, the moment when the maximal sugar amount per berry is being reached, and the moment around 15th of July when we are loading sugar into the berries at the maximal speed. So the question now is, in 2014, 23.5 bricks could be reached early August. So the fruit now, the skin polyphenols are maturing on the warmer, longer days. So how is this going to affect not only the plant water needs? Remember Marcus Keller last year, he showed to us that once the crop load has been achieving its maximal sugar amounts, 23, 24 bricks, then there is more needs for maintaining the turgidity of the fruit on the canopy. So result from that is the plant water deficit can be quickly higher because the plant water needs are higher as a result of crop load being loaded with sugar. Questions about polyphenol, questions about plant water stress, questions about the ripening pattern itself. I thought it was very good to invite Laurent Deluc because historically what struck me with Laurent's works was he was one of the first ones to really document how pre-veraison water deficit was shaping the composition of the berry. And his work was very good not only because he was looking at molecular composition of the berry before veraison and after veraison, but even the genetic activation of genes involved in the maturing of the ripening. So we were very happy when Laurent accepted to come to discuss with us basic questions about ripening. So Laurent, thank you.